Whenever there's an extremely successful game, many game studios tend to follow the trend, and it feels like 80% of the games released in the following years are in the same genre as that game. But before PUBG and Battle Royales, before Hearthstone and digital trading card games, even before League of Legends and MOBAs, there was World of Warcraft. And while WoW by far wasn't the first MMORPG ever made, it was the game that made them accessible to the masses. And with its immense success, the era of MMORPGs began. According to Wikipedia, around 160 MMOs were released just between 2004 and 2015 alone. That's a lot. And while not every single game on this list was released in the West, we still got our fair share of games over here too. Games many people look back at with fond memories of grinding gear and running dungeons for days on end. And I played a lot of them. That's why I decided to play 8 MMORPGs from the 2000s MMO boom to find out if they would still hold up in today's gaming landscape. Or, you know, see if they're at least still fun to play. Now, don't expect me to go full Josh Strife haze on the games and analyze every little detail there is. I'm just going to jump into some of the games I enjoyed playing as a kid and share my experiences with you guys. And if it sucks, well, then I'm going to say so and simply stop playing it. And believe me when I say, sometimes it's better to let memories be memories. The first game I played was Fly for Fun, or Flyff for short. Originally released in August of 2004 in Korea, meaning the game even predates World of Warcraft, it found its way into the Western market in 2006. Now, many MMOs released at the time had a unique mechanic, setting or gameplay aspect to stand out from the competition, and in the case of Flyff it was flying. I mean, it's right there in the title. And I still remember that after I found out about that, I immediately wanted to play it. You mean to tell me there's a huge world to explore and I could fly around in it? My mind was blown. Bear in mind, this was well before flying became common in MMORPGs. So let's see if Flyff still manages to ignite this spark of childlike wonder within me. Or if the years have numbed me down to the point where the only thing I can get excited about is when McDonald's sells the deep fried shrimps again. As of the recording of this video, there are 2 ways to play Flyff. One is through the publisher Play2Bit, where you need to download the client and play the game from there, and the other one is Flyff Universe, published by the original developer Gala Games. I'm going with the second option because Flyff Universe has the huge bonus of being fully playable in your browser. And as soon as you click on the Play Now button, you get thrown into the character creation without even needing to create an account first. The editor itself is very bare bones, so let's jump right into the action. After a few seconds of staring at a wide hellscape of textureless 3D models, the first thing I noticed is that there are actually a lot of people playing the game. And after a quick tutorial from Clippy, I met up with my friend who I played most of the MMOs with in ye old days and who agreed to accompany me in some of the games. First thing I do is open the inventory, and there I discovered that the game provides every new player with a little gift box which contains some potions, XP boosts and a pair of blue wings which are purely cosmetic. Quests in Flyff are marked by a red exclamation mark, and the first few just send you around town to talk to people and introduce you to the world and the equipment system. So nothing out of the ordinary. The game also has a feature where it spawns a huge arrow above your head after clicking on a quest objective, so I had no problem finding my way around. After equipping a new sword, it's time to finally go kill some monsters. Not because I had to for a quest, no, it was just because I finally wanted to kill stuff. Early combat in Flyff is as standard as it gets. You simply double click on an enemy and let the character do the rest. Of course, there are also skills to learn. You unlock them by spending skill points in the skill tree and drag them down here in any order you like. Then all you have to do is press C and your character will rotate through them one by one. But we didn't know that, and so my friend and I went through the majority of our playtime wondering why we couldn't drag the skills we just unlocked into the quick slots. After leveling up, the game prompts me to link an account to the character, or else I will lose all my progress if I ever were to clear my browser cookies. Which, to be honest, in reality would mean that I had access to him literally forever. But this notification pops up every time you level up, so I just created an account real quick to get rid of it. Or so I thought at least. While creating and linking a new account was no problem, finding my character again was. Because after relogging I had to choose a server, and being from Europe I of course thought that the game automatically created the first character on a European server, which of course it didn't. I even thought something went wrong and my character got deleted, since the game prompted me to create a new one every time I chose a server. But after trying out every European server, I found my original character just chilling there on an American one. With that out of the way, let's get on with the game. We head back into the town and finally accepted a quest that actually needs us to kill some monsters, so we do exactly that. On the way there I discovered that pressing escape ends the full screen mode, reminding me that this is still a browser game, and since I'm used to closing pretty much every window in video games with escape, this gets annoying very quickly. It wasn't until much later that I found out that this can be bypassed by using the browser's full screen mode instead of the one in the game options. Once we arrived at the monster's location, we went on to kill 15 of them. The next quest needed us to kill 15 other monsters, and for the one after that we had to pick up an item at a specific location. You might have already guessed it, but quests in Flyff, at least at the early levels, are pretty standard. You kill, collect, and sometimes you do both. And that's why more experienced players skip questing altogether. Let me show you how. While me and my friend were killing some innocent wildlife, I noticed some random dude walk past me accusing me of being a bot. And quick-witted as I am, I of course countered with an eloquent answer. As it turned out, this guy wanted me and my friend to join his power level scheme, because like in pretty much any MMO, if you are in a group you share the XP of kills. But now you may ask, yeah, what's so special about killing mobs in a group? I'm glad you asked. You see this character here, the one who's just mindlessly following our new friend? That's actually a high level twink of his, who is not in our group and is just here to give us like 10 buffs every 15 minutes or so. The thing is though, these buffs are massive. Enemies that took several health pots and a minute or so to kill now die in 2 hits. Even monsters we previously stood no chance against were no match. So fully buffed up and with our new friends we went on to tear through hordes of monsters, completely emptying their spawn locations. And strangely enough, I had the most fun in Flyff while doing so. You might think that it's boring and repetitive, but there is something deeply satisfying watching your experience shoot up while mindlessly clicking on stuff. RuneScape players will understand. We did this until we hit level 15 and then parted ways, because that's when you can finally choose a class. Or job as it's called here. Flyff has 4 different jobs which you can each further specialize later on. I decided to go for the Acrobat class simply because there's a subclass called Crack Shooter and I found that funny. Each class of course has their own weapons and mine are the yo-yos, which have medium range and the chance to knock back enemies. Of course the new class also comes with a new skill tree, but at this point I could only learn like 3 skills, and to be honest, despite the effect saying for example pulls target closer, it never actually did so and I just used the skills to increase my damage output. I then went back to the town to do some more quests, but shortly after decided I would wrap my playthrough of Flyff up. I know I didn't even unlock flying, the literal hook of this game, but grinding it out to level 20 just seemed too tedious for now. I unlocked it back in the day, and if I remember correctly, at the early levels it's basically just another way of transportation. All in all though, I can confidently say Flyff is still an enjoyable game to play for a few hours here and there even today. It has an active community, and if you're into grindy old school MMOs, I'm sure you will get your money's worth. Wait, money's worth? That reminds me, what about the cash shop? Well, it's just as you would expect, littered with cosmetics, pets that automatically collect loot and some stat boosting items like the cloaks or the power scroll. So definitely some pay to win elements here, although I obviously can't tell how strong these really are. Let's move on to the next game. Rappelz is a game. At least I think it is. With how blurry and tiny the game is, I can only assume so. Now there are many games, especially older ones that start in windowed mode and maybe even with a lower resolution than your monitor. But the difference is those typically let you change these settings once you're in the actual game. Rappelz however doesn't even let me click on the resolutions, and when I tried to switch to full screen, well, let me show you what happens. Yeah, not exactly the best experience for new players. And trust me, I tried everything. Restarting the game didn't help. Maybe there's an options button I missed in the launcher. Nope. What about where I select a server? Again, nothing. This is the point where I normally would just say fuck it and uninstall the game. But for the sake of this video, I decided to at least try it. And trust me, it gets worse. Also, if you ever want to try the game out for yourself, which I don't recommend by the way, you have to download it from the official site, because according to the reviews the Steam version only supports the Russian language. So after choosing a server you have to pick one of 3 different races. There are the Asura, the Gaia and the Deva. And I assume each race stands for a different magic type, at least that's what I think. It's not that there's any explanation. Also, why are there levels displayed for each race? Is this the max level you can get playing the specific race? race? Am I going to start at this level? Is this some sort of overall level based on how many players have chosen the race? So many questions and no answers. But whatever, I picked Deva because it has the highest level, and on the next screen I get an overview of the class tree. It seems that every new character starts out as a guide and then advances through different jobs. So it's very similar to Flyff. The first jobs you can unlock here are the Holy Warrior, the Cleric or the Breeder, with the final job of Master Breeder. Yep, seems I picked the right race. The character customization only features a handful of faces, hairstyle and colors, but the game was released back in 2006, so I won't hold that against it. And after creating my character, I spawn in the middle of some glowing rings with my character slowly walking for no apparent reason. I then open the inventory because I feel a bit naked and equip everything equipable. And again we got some free wings. I'm starting to see a pattern. But there's also an epic pirate cape. Nice. I then walk down the path and kill my first enemy, and instantly got a level up. I mean, cool I guess. Or maybe it was just a bug and nope, I killed another one and now I'm level 3. After killing 2 pigeons. I don't know about you, but I feel like the balancing team has some work to do in terms of level progression. Next, I quickly head to the first quest giver before I accidentally reach max level, and of course I have to kill more enemies. So I kill 3 more and turn in the quest, ready to be showered in XP again. But no, turns out I only get a fraction of what killing pigeons would reward me with. The next quest wants me to learn some skills, and it was at this point I realized that most of my quick slots were hidden behind the chat. And guess what? There is no way to resize the window or make it go away. Well, why would I need half of my skill slots anyway when I can just drag my skills way over here? The next quest giver is a little bit down the road, and it's here where I get my first mount. I like it when games give you a mount early on. It makes traversing much easier and whoa, what the heck was that? Okay, it seems that if you ride over certain areas, the game just glitches out. You just won't give me a break, Rappelz, won't you? I mean, things like that can happen, I understand that, especially in big worlds, but come on, I literally only walked like 5 steps. Anyway, after I had some fun glitching around, I completed some more quests and headed into the first town, where I tried to make some new friends. Unfortunately, those attempts were very one-sided. Shortly after, I decided to check my inventory again and found a hidden village return pass. I don't know why I have this and where it will bring me, but it sounds like it can't be worse than where I am now. Ah yes, it teleported me to the hidden village. Could have figured that out by myself. But hey, it seems there are experienced players around. So I asked the question that's been on my mind since the very moment I started the game. And I got ignored again, just like back then on Tinder. You know what, let's just get out of here. So I headed to the teleporter and picked a random location. After arriving there, I saw a character that was very obviously a bot and decided to follow them, because that sounded like more fun than actually playing the game. And as expected, they were just going to the nearest enemy spawn to kill some monsters. After watching for a bit, I got bored and decided that I would just kill myself and then finally be over with the game. So I attacked the nearest enemy, a level 35 rock turtle, and prepared for the inevitable one-shot I would receive. But Rappelz did it again. It defied all expectations that were ever set for MMORPGs, because I, a fresh level 14 character who hasn't even played the game for an hour, was able to beat the level 35 rock turtle. And I didn't even had to use any potions or anything. But this sparked my curiosity. I wanted to know what the strongest monster was that I could beat. So I ventured out into the farthest spots of the map to find a worthy opponent. And there he was, deep in the crevices of the second Velmor mine, a level 73 Craniator. It seemed as if I have finally found my match. My health was dropping lower and lower and I did little to no damage. But then it happened. My character just randomly healed back to full life. I mean, what? I'm not even doing anything, I only use the one skill that I have, and it's a damage skill. But for some reason I just can't die. God please, why can't I die? Why do I have to suffer and play this game? So yeah, I defeated a level 73 enemy at level 17. After that I browsed through the shop a bit to find the standard assortment of pets, mounts, skins and consumables. But also some equipment with actual stats, which is never good in a free-to-play game. Again, I have no way to tell if they're actually any good, but since we're talking about Rappelz, I'm just gonna assume yes. I then found a neat little tower on a hill and decided it's time for one last attempt at getting my question answered. This time by whispering at someone in the chat. Hi, quick question, is the max resolution for this game 124 by 768? I cannot change it in the options. And his answer was simply, I have no idea bro. How do you have no idea? Are you playing on an old CRT monitor and just never had to change resolutions? Have you not noticed that half of your skill slots are unusable? I am genuinely stumped. You know what? Let's move on to the next game. Ah yes, RF Online. A game where you can play as a mech and just... Or at least I think that's what it is, because even though I knew of the game pretty much since its release and even owned a physical copy back in the day, I never actually got it to work. And as it turns out, I most likely never will, since the game's official servers have been shut down at the beginning of 2024. Why am I still mentioning it then? Well, simply because I find it funny that on the official download page, it's described as the game that started the race wars. Cabal Online launched in 2005 and is most likely one of the more well-known games on this list. So let's see what the game that dubbed itself the revolution of action combat has to offer almost 20 years later. The first thing that catches my eye are the really elaborate and well-animated transitions of the different classes. There are a total of 9 jobs to choose from, 5 sword and 4 magic types. I went with the gladiator and made the best Xehanort I could with the limited options. Once in game, I was greeted by the same graphic style pretty much every 2000s Korean free-to-play MMO had. I then did some tutorial quests that taught me the basics of the game, such as equipping items, using the map or distributing stat points. After that, it was time to kill my first enemy and experience the revolution of action combat firsthand. So I double-clicked on the monster and, well, the combat feels just as you would expect. With the exception that I don't even have to actively use my skills. So I just double-clicked my way through the next few enemies and watched my character do all the work. Not exactly what I would call revolutionary action combat, but at least the animations are nice. So I talked to some more NPCs who then sent me into the next zone. The world of Cabal is not one big open world, but instead is divided into different smaller areas, all accessed by this teleportation room. And when I say small, I mean it. Getting from one end of the map to the other takes about 2 minutes max. But oh boy, do they have cool names. After talking to the instructor in Desert Scream, I had to go back to Bloody Ice, and it was then as I was walking back into the town and watched some of the higher level players dance that I realized what a banger background music this zone had. Unfortunately, that's about everything interesting I have to show for Cabal Online. I played the game for about 2.5 hours in total, but except of the occasional dungeon, which consisted of 2 conjoined empty rooms with enemies and some new skills, there really didn't happen much worthy of talking about. Honestly, in retrospect, the only reason I played the game for as long as I did was because clicking on enemies and watch my character absolutely go ham with his animations was pretty relaxing and put me in some kind of flow state. But overall, I would say the best thing about Cabal still is... Next up, we have the horny game, also known as Vindictus. The developers know what people play this game for, and they made sure all of their budget went into it. I of course talk about the highly detailed and premium looking puppies. Just look at this cute little... Nah, of course it's the waifus. If you tell me you're playing this game because of the story, the graphics, or even the action combat, I know you're lying. Maybe that's why people keep playing the game, I don't know since I've only played the first few hours, but I'm 100% sure 90% of the player base started because of the female character models. And honestly, who can blame them? But let's start at the beginning. In Vindictus, you choose from a roster of pre-made heroes, each with their own fighting style, weapons and skills rather than making your own character. And whenever you click on a hero, the game plays a little audio introduction, which is pretty cool the first time, but gets annoying rather quickly, especially when it starts over and over again while clicking through the roster. So to escape this, I just go with Vela over here because I like her design. Of course, there is still the option to customize your character, and I would say it's pretty extensive given the age of the game. It has your standard selection of hairstyles and eye colors, but also a ton of different sliders to optimize your looks. Once I was satisfied with my looks, I got thrown into a tutorial dungeon where a giant spider attacks a church, but instead of just shooting it down with arrows, the oracle insists of talking some sense into it. Yeah, no way this could backfire, right? After the cutscene, I'm then given control of my character and need to fight my way up to the church. And even though I joked about how the only redeeming features of Vindictus are the massive bazoingas, the action combat is actually really fun and feels super responsive. Left click is a basic attack, right click is a heavier smashing strike, and on the spacebar you even have a dodge button. So I make short work of the werewolves and go on. But of course the church isn't built with a giant ass spider climbing its walls in mind, and the roof starts crashing down. And of course the Oracle gets hit by the falling debris. The game uses this opportunity to teach me about another mechanic, picking up stuff from the ground. And while at first I thought this was just some neat little mechanic to underline the danger of the situation, it later turned out that you can pick up pretty much anything in the dungeons, including falling enemies, to use them as weapons. I don't know why, but I just loved it. Back at the church, I made my way up to the rooftop where it's finally time to face the spider. This is also where I get to use my skills for the first time, and again, I really like how it feels to use them. And after a short fight, the spider retreats, and then proceeds to get pierced by multiple ballista shots and crushed by the huge church bell. The Oracle mourns a bit, and then it's finally time to visit the first town. Or maybe the only town, since a couple of high-level players hang around here too. The first thing I did was position myself next to this dancing chat, where I then tried to change the control scheme so I could play with my controller. Unfortunately, for some reason I wasn't able to get it to work, and in my frustration I did what I always do in MMOs and looked at the awesome gear of other players. And suddenly I forgot why I even was mad in the first place. After some more idling around, I met up with some friends who agreed to try the game with me, and we got to questing. Which, as far as I can tell, consists of running around in the town, talking to NPCs in their respective houses, and then head to the harbor where you can board a ship to get to the next dungeon. But enough talking, let's set sail. The ship also functions as some sort of waiting room where you can wait for all the teammates to get ready, and on it are some destructible crates, barrels, and this funny fish that flops around every time you hit it. I know it sounds trivial, but I really like it when games do this. It just creates a fun atmosphere before heading out into the actual mission. Once we were all loaded into the dungeon, the objective was simple: go and kill every monster in our way. And as I mentioned before, combat is something Vindictus is very good at, especially because of the use enemies as a weapon mechanic. Of course, since this is the first dungeon, the enemies posed no threat to us at all, and we just breezed our way through until we encountered the final boss, who we also defeated without any problems. So we headed back to town, accepted the next quest and repeated the process. After that, we headed back to town, accepted the next quest and did it once again. And oh my, that's all there is to it, right? You see, since Vindictus doesn't have an open world, it's more like a dungeon crawler where you clear dungeons with your group and come back to town to cash in rewards and equip new gear. And once this realization settled in, we were kinda done with the game, because it seemed like we already experienced the whole gameplay loop, and doing any more dungeons wouldn't present us with anything new. Maybe there's more later on, but since we just wanted to give Vindictus a try for this video, we decided that we would spend our time more productive. So why don't you go on to the next game while I stay here for a little longer and soak in the warm water. Okay, the next game will be a short one. Because I never ever played an MMO, I wanted to log out of faster than 4 story. Well, okay, maybe Rappelz, but 4 story is at a close second. The game starts out as you would expect. You create a character as per usual and select a class. And at this point I was optimistic because the game didn't look too bad, it had interesting races and classes like the Evocator and Nightwalker, but most importantly the friend I played 4 story with said he used to play it all the time back in the day. So it must be good, right? Well, I guess his interpretation of fun and mine are just vastly different. In his defense though, after we were done, he said the game has changed a lot since its release, and the thing that made 4 story so miserable for me wasn't even in back then. Let me show you what I mean. After creating my character and loading into the game, I was greeted by a cutscene I immediately skipped and talked to Leon. Also, I'm sorry, but I downloaded the German launcher by mistake and was unable to change the language without re-downloading the whole game. So yeah, enjoyed some German text. Anyways, I talked to some NPCs in the camp and they then tasked me with killing some spiders and basilisks. As I followed the giant glowing arrows on the ground, I realized that my hotbars are filled to the brim with different skills and attacks, and since I literally just started the game, I have no idea what any of them do. I really don't like it when games do that, especially when it's in the tutorial where you're supposed to slowly get the hang of one mechanic at a time. But as it turns out, it doesn't matter, because literally all I have to do from now on is press the F key. My character then not only runs to the enemies all by himself, no, he also attacks them using all the skills I know nothing about. After defeating the first enemy, all I have to do is press F again, and then he attacks the next one. Once all of the spiders are defeated, my character even automatically runs to the location of the next enemies I need to kill. And yeah, that's basically all there is to 4 story. The entire gameplay, if you can call it that, resolves around pressing one key, at least in the 40 minutes that I have played, which makes it the least played MMO MMO on this list, even beating Rappelz. Funnily enough, once I've left the tutorial and got teleported to the first city, there were a ton of players, which made me hopeful that what I just experienced was just some sort of weird design choice for the tutorial area. But nope, turns out I still only have to press the F key. Well, on to the next game. Up until now, every game I showed on this list was and is a free-to-play title, and originally I intended to keep it that way, but since Guild Wars was my main MMO back in the day, I decided to make an exception and see for myself if the fond memories I have of this game still hold up to this day. The first challenge of playing Guild Wars though was downloading the game, since the download button is pretty well hidden in the depths of NCSoft's website. But once I found it and booted up the game, I was greeted by my old friends. There they were, my main character and also all of my twins I use for farming and even some I completely forgot about. But to truly experience what it would be like to start the game from scratch nowadays, I of course created a new character. The first decision I had to make was which expansion I wanted my character to start in, and I of course chose the OG game Prophecies. While the character editor itself isn't really anything special, I always found that the Guild Wars series had some really interesting classes when compared to other MMOs, like the Monk, Mesmer or Dervish in a later expansion for example. But I felt like keeping it simple and created myself a ranger, and after the opening cutscene that brought me right back to my early teens, it was time to accept the first quest and group up with my buddy. And to my surprise, we even saw other players here in the tutorial area. But of course, since it's Guild Wars, once we left the city there were only the two of us, because the entire game is instance based and the only place you can see people not in your group are in the cities and outposts. So let's talk to this dude and start killing stuff. The combat is the standard tap target system, but what makes it special is that you can only equip 8 skills at a time, both from your main and secondary class. And while this may sound like it's not very much, it is by far one of my favorite things about Guild Wars, since you really have to put thought into your build and specialize your character, instead of having every skill of your class at your disposal at any time. Also, it makes for a really clean UI, which I like. And trust me, with the right skills and equipment you could pull off insane strategies. So after about half an hour of doing some run-of-the-mill quests and killing more enemies, it was time to pick up my secondary class. I chose the Mesmer simply because I liked the idea of a debuffing ranger. Then it was time for the big finale of the tutorial section, which basically is just a dungeon with some NPCs that help you, followed by a cutscene in which the whole region gets destroyed. But instead of doing that, I somehow ended up in a PvP match. I had no idea this was even possible in the tutorial. Okay, whatever, let's see how strong my debuffing ranger strat is. I just need to make sure I stay out of range of the enemies, apply my debuffs, and I got my ass handed. So, where was I? Alright, dungeon and then catastrophic event. Once the cutscene was done, I got spawned at the exact same place where I was after creating the character, with the small difference that everything is now destroyed. Next, it's time to head to the remains of the city, which functions as the hub in this area, to regroup with my friend again. And since we are now out of the tutorial, we should see more players here. And we do. Not many, but some. I have also logged onto my other characters to check out the main cities players used to hang out at, and while I wouldn't say this game is sprawling with life, there are people still playing this game, especially on the American servers from what I've seen. So after arriving at Ascalon City, we talk to War Master Titus and he recommends us to recruit some NPCs to aid us on our mission. Guild Wars has this neat feature where you can hire NPCs of different classes that will then help you out once you leave the hub areas. You know, in case you need some additional firepower or a healer. They are located in pretty much every city and I highly recommend using them. You will see why in a minute. With our new companions, my buddy and I went outside and followed the big quest marker on the map, defeating everything that dared to stand in our way. Well, at least until we accidentally pulled way too many enemies at once. And realizing that, we sadly had no other choice but to make a run for it, leaving our companions to die. But luckily the portal to the next area wasn't too far away, and after some more casualties I managed to pass through it, which also revived the downed members. From there on we picked our fights more carefully and managed to get to the quest objective, which was this dude over there. And remember when I said we would need the NPCs in our team? Well, we could have used way more than just the two of them, because no matter what we did, this guy just wouldn't go down. Whenever we thought we had him, he would just heal himself back up to nearly full health. The good thing was, since we already killed all of the ads, he had not nearly enough damage to kill us. But unfortunately, it seemed like neither could we. It took 5 minutes for him to fuck up his rotation or something, but eventually we managed to defeat him. and with this me and my friend decided it would be enough with Guild Wars. Now listen, I'm 100% sure you can still have a lot of fun with the game nowadays, especially since you don't necessarily need other players to clear the content. But for us, who called Tyria our second home for a few years, it just wasn't the same anymore. Sure, it was awesome to see all of my old characters and look at their inventories and equipment and remember all of the adventures I had been on with them, but playing the game again nearly 15 years later made me realize that sometimes it's okay to leave things as they are and simply enjoy the memories of them. So with that said, let's move on to the next game. Dragonica, or Dragon Saga as it's called nowadays, is by far the game I had the most fun with on this list. Well, if you ignore the first time I started it up. It's a side-scroller MMO with action combat similar to L-Sword, but with much smoother combat, at least in my opinion. I mean, just take a look at those juicy attacks. The character creation is, as you would imagine, pretty limited since the game has this whole chibi aesthetic going on, but one thing I really liked is how expressive of a face you can give your character. The game has a total of 4 starting classes, which each will specialize into different subclasses later on. I opted for the warrior, and after a little cutscene explaining some of the lore, I got thrown into this little tutorial dungeon, and the first thing I did was setting up my gamepad controls, which worked perfectly fine except for the fact that I wasn't able to move diagonally since there was no way to configure a button input for 2 directions at the same time. That made the game feel so clunky and unintuitive that I decided to stick to the keyboard controls. On with the tutorial. I move right, bounce off a flower and meet this little girl who is in dire need of rescue from some wolves. Because in typical video game fashion, the guards that have presumably trained their entire lives are just useless. So we finally get the chance to beat up some enemies. As I mentioned before, the combat is very action heavy and more akin to an arcade brawler like Streets of Rage. You move with the arrow keys, have your basic attacks on X and skills on the Q, W, E, R, A, S, D and F keys. After I beat up the wolf gang, I completed the tutorial and proceeded to the first city. There I grouped up with my friend again, and then we accepted every quest we could find, because that's just what you do in MMORPGs. We then left the city and hopped our way to our first dungeon entrance, which not only is the fastest way to get around, but also looks freaking cool. Dungeons are the main way to progress in Dragon Saga. While there are enemies to defeat in the open world, the bulk of all quests you get will need you to go into a dungeon, defeat certain enemies within it, or just clear it entirely. As of the dungeons themselves, those are always stage based, which you need to clear off monsters in order to progress to the next one, with a boss battle after a set amount of stages depending on the difficulty you chose. So in my case, since we've chosen hard mode, it's after stage 3. We defeated the big bad wolf and the game presents us with a statistics window and rewards us with some additional loot. After leaving the dungeon, it's finally time to invest in some new skills. I can now create a tornado knocking up enemies and summon a giant 10-ton hammer. The game also lets you create macros where you can chain skills in a specific order to create sick combos, but I barely use them because after some more quests and about half an hour later, I finally got to unlock my Ice and Fire Hammer. And from then on, all I did was cycle through them and obliterate absolutely everything in my way. It might not seem like it, but this is what having a blast looks like. And while I will be just pressing 3 buttons for the rest of the game, my friend who has chosen the mage actually had to think about the timing of his skills and which one to use. Ha, what a nerd. At this point, I'm level 9, have defeated Vagabond more times than I would like to admit, and learned how to extract soul points from items to upgrade stuff. Next, we enter Trader's Ridge, a new zone with higher level enemies and even a few other players to greet us. And with a quest log full of quests, we just started killing everything we came across. A little further into the zone, we stumbled across a little camp, aka the quest hub of this area, and we turned in the quests we have completed along the way and blindly accepted all of the new ones they had for us, as you do in MMOs. While we were grinding some monsters, we found the dungeon entrance of this zone and figured we would give it a go since surely some of the enemies in there are our targets. And while the trash mobs were as easy as ever, the boss was the first actual challenge we came across. He had a dash that would knock us down, an AoE attack that dealt a decent amount of damage, and most importantly, he actually could take some punches. Meaning this time we had to keep an eye on our positioning. It was also the first time that I had to use my potions, but since I had more than enough of them, it was just a matter of time before we managed to defeat the giant X-Bro. Yeah, that's his actual name. giant eggs, bro. Back at the camp we got to do a little cooking tutorial and turned in our quests. And from there on it's just rinse and repeat. I won't go into detail about the next few hours of gameplay since they were essentially the same as what you've already seen, just with different zones and dungeons. So to wrap things up, I'm going to show you the first big city I've got to enter once I reach level 20. Since this is where most of the players should hang around, and playing an MMO without at least a decent player base can feel a bit dull. Behold, the Port of the Winds. This is a city shaped like a circle with a ton of NPCs, stores, event stuff, a chapel where you can marry other players, and yeah, even some players. Just don't expect it to be bustling with life. I even switched servers to see if there was more activity on that one, but the number of players remained manageable. But all in all, if you can live with the cute chibi art style of the game and want to play an MMORPG with a fun and action heavy combat system, I can highly recommend Dragon Saga. Wow, so you've actually watched the entire video. Or maybe you just had it on your second monitor as background noise to ease some of that existential dread. Well, since you're here anyway, why not leave a like and subscribe? It would really help me and the channel out and I would really appreciate it. Anyways, thanks for watching, see you in the next one, bye.